Our next speaker is Mr Hugh Kane, and for those of you who have read the biographies will see that Hugh has had a long and distinguished career in the public service and has most recently joined a company called Genio, and I think he's both going to give us some commentary and tell us a little bit about Genio at the same time.
Thanks very much. Very happy to be here today. Genio, a very new organisation, about 3 years in operation. We've been working in thus far the area of mental health and disability, and we're about to move into working in the whole area of dementia. I suppose looking at the needs that have been described to us in this particular research about this huge number of people with this particular difficulty coming towards us, and put that with the happy state of our financial position that looks like it's probably going to last to 2041 as well. One of the key pieces that we're involved in Genio is around looking at how we can reconfigure resources so that we achieve better outcomes in a more cost-effective way. And those resources are the ones we've talked about today. We're talking about families and carers, the state sector, the voluntary and the community sector. And also, wherever other resources are there in local communities and expertise to allow us to work in this particular area. I suppose one of the very core principles for us at Genio is that the individual is at the heart and at the centre of every single thing we do. So anything we do or any work we're involved in begins with that particular person, what it is we can do to support that particular person to achieve and live as full a life as is possible. And we do that then by adding, looking at who around potentially is able to support someone. There's been a lot of emphasis today on looking at specialists and health services, and they're really, really important. But if we don't look after the other things, the other parts of people's lives, they're going to get sicker. So it's really, really important that people who do have dementia are very actively involved in their own families and with their own friends, both receiving friendship and love and giving friendship and love. And also that they're involved in their communities and their communities are there. And that all those kind of things that we love doing, the game of golf, the game of tennis, going to the Country Women's Association, that we're able to continue to do as many of those things as possible. And that if we do that and bring that together, well then the need to rely on very specialist services shall lessen, and we would hope then that people would be able to continue to live in their own communities in a very positive way for as long as is absolutely possible, and certainly longer than is currently experienced by many people now. Just very quickly then, at the moment we're in a process of establishing this the Genio Dementia Project. And again, what we're trying to do, the aim is to increase and integrate the current range and new range of quality community supports. And by doing that then, we can therefore inform public policy. And if we're going to invest in the future, what would be the best way of doing that? We have a pot of funding of 4 million over 4 years, 2 million from Atlantic Philanthropies, who we've heard thanked here, and we'll thank them for our piece here as well, and also 2 million of government funding through my colleague, my former colleague Noel in the HSE. And what the focus of the project really is that we'll develop and test new service models, and arising out of that then attempt to influence public policy and investment, and that we would also try to build leadership in the field of working in this area. So just very quickly, the scope of the project then, we're looking for 4 projects across the country, right across the spectrum from early onset, and that'll be included. And we're looking for areas that would have a broad range and a systemic impact, so that we're looking for projects in areas that can be replicated very easy. The focus of the project is in six main areas of activity. So we're starting off with trying to develop person-centred and community-based supports. And I think that's really, really important, both for people with dementia and for their carers. And it's about building those into their community. The second piece then is to develop the support services around the people, so to look at how we might deliver and work with people in a different kind of way, and to both integrate and enhance how we do that, and also to raise awareness and skills, identify barriers and solutions around that whole issue of integrative work, and that our colleague from France had mentioned. So we're going to use a community development approach. We're going to do a bottom-up rather than a top-down. So this is going into communities, bringing consortia of interested people together. We're talking about people with dementia and their carers. We're talking about whatever resource exists in the community, and the professionals as well, so that we will use that kind of resource as a way of building on and harnessing the energy and the expertise that's there. The fourth area then is we're going to apply and test best practice models. We've done so from Genio. We have some interest in learning from mental health and disability and children's services. But on some of the key pieces there, again, is this whole issue of the more you focus on individuals, tailor things at an individual basis, the more appropriate and the outcomes are generally better. And we've mentioned earlier intervention, the whole piece around how we do that integration around and consultation and participation. We think it's really, really important. In the work we've done so far, it's really important that we develop a learning network. And again, we'll be looking at this across these 4 pilot sites, so as they're able to learn from each other, share the learning, and bring in whatever expertise we need that we can tap into and do that. And the final piece then in the activities is that we're going to collect data, both quantitative data and qualitative data, from the demonstration sites. And again, this is so as well to demonstrate what works and what doesn't work, how the projects, what were the pieces of it that work really well, so as that we build the evidence so as that we can inform the development of the National Dementia Strategy and how we might work in this kind of way. We're looking at, across some core interventions, so obviously we're looking for, fairly immediate access for people to respite, and we're talking about community and home-based respite rather than out-of-home respite. We think it's really important, people have mentioned this, that there's support for primary care providers in the early identification of dementia. The whole issue of how, if people are staying at home and living in community, there's a huge role for assistive technology, and we're going to look at that as well. And then the whole issue of how we support carers and intervene by giving, people mentioned, lack of information, giving people some support, and I think the carer school that our colleague from Norway mentioned is really interesting. Just in terms of the development of the strategy, from our perspective, we think there are a few principles that should be involved. So we really think it's really important that people can choose where they want to have their care and how that's delivered. That's really, really important. We absolutely and really, really are convinced that people have to be involved in their own care. It's critical that if we're working with people, that they have to be as involved as they're able to be in doing that. I think it's important if people have some control over the cost of what it is, of the package that they have, that they can choose more freely rather than, so it becomes an individual and a family-led rather than a provider-led service. I think the responses that we have to be a much wider scope, much more proactive and much more responsive. It's no use saying to someone, if you have a problem in your family today, we can't give you a respite for 2 weeks. It has to be fairly instant source, because again, they're the things that support people. The whole issue of social, people have to be included in their communities, and these are both people who are living at home and people who are living in institutional settings, that we adopt that whole notion of including people as much as possible. I think the needs of the individual with dementia and their carer very often are the same, but very often they're different, and I think we need to recognise that and look at how we manage that particular tension that can arise from time to time in the development of a strategy. We think the principle has to be that people with dementia lead full and are actively involved in their lives. It's really important for us. And I think the other piece then is people's ability to be able to determine how they're going to be looked after and cared for. And if people don't have that capacity, that there's some role for independent advocacy. And potentially earlier on in the disease that we use things like living will, so people are asked to look at what are the issues and how they might like to be treated as it progresses. Very quickly then, we think it's really important that there's a huge education problem around stigma right across the community, right within the professions and amongst each and every one of us, because I think that again will facilitate a different focus. And I think we saw great examples of the colleague from the UK who spoke this morning about her own illness and about how she's still active and how stigma potentially can impact on how we may look and support people with it. We also think that there should be a focus around a skills-based focus around education right across the spectrum. So people with dementia, there should be a focus on some education and development of skills and techniques for there. We've mentioned the families and the carers, and the colleagues in Norway have done that. We need this broader education within the community, both in terms of giving information about dementia, about stigma, but also about, and we heard it earlier this morning, about how all of us can maybe lessen the risk for developing dementia as we grow older. And then the final group would then, there would have to be a fairly targeted education piece for the professionals in this particular area. Just nearly there. Two last areas. I think it's really important that we have safeguarding for people. A lot of the standards that we have are focused where people are not living at home or not living in the community. So we need to have standards and protections that are appropriate for people living in their own homes and in their own communities. And just to finish then, it's really important that people continue to lead full lives for as long as they can. So it's not just about healthcare alone. It's really important that we bring in the natural supports that are there in the community. There's a role for a much wider group of stakeholders, local authorities to provide housing, voluntary and community organisations, business organisations. So it's to bring in a much wider perspective than we've heretofore considered. And again, with the ultimate aim of helping people to live active and engaged lives. And if you want any more information on our application process or on Genio, it's on our website there. Thanks very much.